Hello and welcome to another YouTube exclusive of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at DynastyDadFF. Joined as always is my main man at FF Snoog. Today, what we're going to do, we did a podcast and a show of our top 12 redraft running backs with tiers that our man Brock Dynasty. Make sure you follow him. He went up and set it up. Our tier 1 is Hall and McCaffrey. Tier 2, Bijan and Gibbs. Tier 3, Jonathan Taylor, Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley. Tier 4, A-Chain, Henry, Kyron Williams, and then tier 5, Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara. Snoog, we're getting into it today, and I think, we have 3 more guys that belong in that tier 5, and that's that. Yeah. To me, it's a smash zone because you're getting really good production at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, and let's fire it off with a guy that I'm super high on this year. He's a must-draft, must-have running back for me. I just got him in the mid to late fourth of my last redraft. I did a $100 league with a bunch of fellows over on Twitter, Kenneth Walker. And the reason is there's so much to it with him besides the talent, because he's one of those guys that's a super talent. He's explosive. He's an elite athlete. They have a whole new coaching staff over there in Seattle. And Coach McDonald is super, super excited to use Kenneth Walker this year. He literally said word for word, let's use this guy and let's feed him. He can be special. This is a guy, Kenneth Walker, 15 plus games in back-to-back seasons. I know he's had a little bit of injuries nagging there back and forth with him, but paced 1,000 plus yards in both seasons. Still 23 years old. Paced double-digit touchdowns in both seasons. 13.5 points per game in both years. And that's all without catching passes. The new OC, the new head coach said they really want to get Walker involved as a pass catcher this year. They think he could be that 3-down bell cow. The difference between him and Zach Charbonnet as a pass catcher, and I said this on a tweet, I actually put a thread out about this. Kenneth Walker is so elite after the catch. It's not if you can catch a 3-yard swing pass. Everybody can do that in the damn NFL. It's what can you do after the catch? Can you make plays? Can you be dynamic? Kenneth Walker screams all of that. One of the best guys in space in the NFL. I'm absolutely stamping Kenneth Walker this year. He's my RB10 in redraft. He's in that tier with Kamara and Mixon and a few of the guys that we're going to talk about next. But, Dad, who's your next guy?
Dude, Isaiah Pacheco is a guy that I am smashing in the third round everywhere in redraft. He improved every single year in yards from scrimmage, touchdowns, receptions, little to no competition, just Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Deneric Prince. That offense has had rushing by total 13, 16, 18. And then last year dropped off. The entire rushing offense only had 9 touchdowns. But then you see what he was able to do from weeks 12 to 18. He was RB3 in points per game. And then he had 7 touchdowns in 7 of the last 8 games, 8.36 fantasy points per touch. This is someone that what you want is you want a really good running back in an elite situation or an elite running back in a really good situation. This is a really good running back in arguably the best situation there is in Kansas City, where you could, when the season's over, if you told me Isaiah Pacheco had 15 touchdowns, I would not be shocked. I think he is a steal where he's going in redraft in that third round. Guy that I love. If I took wide receiver, and I get a guy that could be an RB1 in the third round, I'm smashing Isaiah Pacheco all day long. And I think there's one more guy that belongs in this tier. There's a couple guys close, but there's one more here that you have that I think really belongs there.
Yeah, speaking of elite running backs that are in elite situations, you don't get that combination often. It's Josh Jacobs over there playing for the Green Bay Packers in 2024. And, I mean, he's been on a bad offense, a bad team his entire NFL career. 14-plus points per game in 5 out of 5 seasons in the NFL so far. Just 2 years ago, he had 19 points per game, 1,600-plus yards and double-digit touchdowns. This is a guy that can be a pass catcher. I mean, he's been a guy that has paced. Last year, he had 37 catches in 12 and a half games. The year before that, 50 in almost every single season since 2020. I think he's a guy that he got the big contract. He's playing in a clear-cut workhorse role for the Green Bay Packers, especially now with Marshawn Lloyd with that hamstring injury, likely missing a lot of time, especially valuable time in the preseason. Jacobs is a guy that profiles as a 3-down back. He got the big contract. He got the guaranteed money. I think he's going to be used in a top 8, top 10 offense in the NFL as a bell cow. 300-plus touches is possible for him. I mean, I love this. Like, when you find a guy that's been good in a bad offense and then they get paid to go play in a good offense, like Derrick Henry with the Ravens, Demont with the Lions when Demont was on the Bears all that time. Like, you're looking for this type of situation, and Jacobs is one of the better talents in the league. So I think after these 15 guys or 14 guys we've talked about, that's like a clear top 15, and then we get into that 16 through 24 range that we're going to talk about here in a second. So who's your next guy?
I have two guys here that I think are a slight tier above the big group. I think it's Rachaad White if it's PPR, and I think it's James Cook if it's half-point PPR. I think Rachaad White is one of the most disrespected running backs in the league when it comes to value. Do I love his inefficiency? No. Do I think he's great between the tackles? Absolutely not. But when you look at what he did last year, 64 receptions for 549 yards, 3 touchdowns, those numbers are better than, or at least on par than with Alvin Kamara. Like he had less receptions, but more yards, more touchdowns, more yards per carry. And then you look at him as a running back, he also had more, it was in that same area as in those inefficient running backs. Alvin Kamara and Rachaad White are very similar. They're not going to get it done with, 4.8, 5.2 yards per carry, but they're going to give you enough of a rushing floor, and they're going to give you that receiving upside. He was RB4 overall, top 12 in fantasy points per game. He's an elite pass catcher. Why not? This is not an elite level offense, but he is going to get a ton of reception work. And Bucky Irving does not scare me. Bucky Irving is more of a guy to give him a blow as opposed to a guy that is going to steal his touches.
Yeah, I'm going to go with James Cook here over at the RB17 spot. And
I know you hate that.
These are back-to-back guys that are just interchangeable for me, Rachaad White, James Cook. But James Cook is a guy for me that, I'm not the biggest fan of him, but he's in a good offense there with Josh Allen. He's in a potential clear opportunity role. I actually am a little bit of a Ray Davis fan myself. I think
big time.
James Cook isn't going to be a guy that scores double-digit touchdowns, but, if you just look at his efficiency metrics from a receiving perspective last year, he was 5th in yards per touch, he was 6th in yards per route run, and he was 2nd in yards per catch as a running back. He had 44 receptions on 450 yards receiving. That's good. That's a really good floor as a receiver. I'd love to see him with 55, 60 receptions. I think that would help his floor a lot, especially a guy that's coming off 1,100 plus yard rushing season. I think he's a guy that, he was 13.7 points per game, top 20 last year as a running back in his second year. He could take a next step and be a guy that hits maybe that 15, 16 points per game. But I also think there's a world where he's not one of those guys that's an elite talent that if for some reason he came out and he was just mediocre and finished outside the top 15, top 20, I wouldn't be absolutely shocked. But if you just look at what the Bills were last year, they were 6th in most run plays per game. So that's something you're looking for as well. He's going to get the ball, he's going to get opportunity, and he's on a good offense, and he has a little bit of a receiving upside there. So I think there's just a lot that makes him a really safe top 17 running back in these rankings. And if you need a running back and you miss on them and you don't feel like reaching, and then you finally get to the point where you're like, I need to take one, and James Cook's sitting there, I'm fine doing it. But he's not a my guy for any means in 2024. But
And this is why in the Patreon, we're doing hand-constructed draft strategies for you, because it's not just rankings, it's where they go. And if you are looking at this, everybody before James Cook and Rachaad White are decent values in that third round. The 4th round is James Cook and Rachaad White, but what you're giving up is you're giving up Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore. I would much rather have the wide receivers in that area, and I would rather wait back. And like I said, in our Patreon, we help you guys out with that kind of stuff. We have all of our rankings, draft assistance. Make sure you guys check it out. SmashAccept.com or Patreon.com/SmashAccept. That's why I would much rather wait to the 5th round. Skip around, get myself DJ Moore or Cooper Kupp rather than, get a guy in the 5th round who is less value. And give me James Conner. Like a fine wine, my man just keeps getting better. He's 29. But he had career high 5.0 yards per carry, 60 broken tackles, is 2nd in the league. He came off as RB13. He's going as RB20. I'm feeling like a smash taking him at RB18 here. If you do, take Trey Benson in round 11, get yourself a premium handcuff. But I think James Conner has proven, and especially the way Trey Benson has struggled a little bit in camp, that James Conner is still going to be that guy for 2024.
Yeah, and going here with 19, there's 2 James Conners in the NFL. There's one in Pittsburgh and there's one in Arizona, and that's Najee Harris. 3 straight 1,000-yard rushing seasons. A little bit inefficient to start off his career. He finally hit 4 yards per carry last year. Double-digit touchdown pace in his 3 seasons. So he was at 10, 10, and 8 there. Really high floor here. We've seen him with 74 receptions and we've seen him with 29. I think that this year with Russ, who's a guy that checks down at a high rate, if he's the starter, he'll get a lot of looks there. Even with Fields there, I think it'll help him efficiency-wise in the run game, just with having that elite rushing QB next to him. They beefed up that offensive line tremendously in this offseason, even though it looks horrific in preseason. I haven't looked much into that. I don't know if it's injuries. They're not starting. I know Troy Fatanu wasn't playing, so I don't know if it's that. Maybe it's lack of chemistry, but that O-line I think is going to progressively get better throughout the season. And then the final cherry on top, Jaylen Warren, one of the better receiving backs in the NFL, one of the more explosive guys, is battling a hamstring injury. That boosts Najee Harris' value incredibly if there's nobody there to eat into his share. So I think Najee really, really high floor here with upside if Warren's out.
Mm-hmm. And talking again about this like 4-5 thing is, now we're taking Aaron Jones to pair with Cooper Kupp as opposed to taking Rachaad White to pair with Zay Flowers. It's not dynasty. It's redraft. And when we're playing redraft, I don't care about the age. When Aaron Jones is coming off as an absolute PPR machine, coming off 5 straight years where he would have had at least 46 receptions last year. That's prorated. 21.6 touches once he got healthy down the stretch. Absolute beast. 8th in explosive run rate, 121 yards per game. And I think, like we talked about on the podcast, Aaron Jones is the biggest beneficiary from Sam Darnold. He's going to get checkdowns. They're going to move him around. And Addison could be suspended. Hawkinson's not ready. Aaron Jones through the roof for the early part of the season, and then maybe trade him midway through to someone else that's struggling where you can pick somebody up and get some massive return. This tier is really good. I mean, we got Connor at 18, Najee at 19, Aaron Jones at 20. And Snook, I think there's arguably 4 more running backs who belong in that RB2 range who could give you weekly RB1 upside, but have that nice RB2 floor, and I love that.
Yeah, there's a guy here that I'm going to jump into that is fitting that mold that we love. Being on an elite offense and having some type of a role that makes you fantasy relevant, and that's David Montgomery. If Jahmyr Gibbs were to ever go down, I hope he never does, one of my favorite players in the league, David Montgomery has top 5, top 10 upside. Mm-hmm. With Jahmyr Gibbs there, he's a top 20 guy. I mean, he paced 15 touchdowns last year. He had 13 in 14 games. That's ridiculous. And he paced 72.5 rushing yards per game. So he was pacing 1,200 rushing yards. So he's a guy that we talk about the Zamir Whites, the Brian Robinsons, like those guys that are those 2-down grinders that don't have that elite upside because they're not in elite offenses and they don't have receiving upside. DeMont only caught 16 passes last year, but David Montgomery's in a top 3 scoring offense. That gives you elite rushing upside to be like a 15, 16, 13 touchdown score. I think, granted, if you look at the second half of the season, Jahmyr Gibbs was on the field way more, got more of the red zone looks. David Montgomery came down a big notch, but he still has a really high floor there. Lions were 7th in team runs per game. He was a top 5 guy in red zone touches last year. Again, those numbers dropped, but they were still solid even when Gibbs was healthy and ready to go. But I think it's Jahmyr Gibbs' show, but I think David Montgomery serves as a really solid high floor running back too, with upside if Jahmyr Gibbs were to ever go away. So I think David Montgomery's a really good option there.
I like that. I'm taking Ramondre Stevenson here. He's one of only 2 running backs to finish inside the top 12 in yards after catch per attempt and have 50-plus targets inside the top 50 draft picks. It was outside the top 50, I should say. It was Ramondre Stevenson and Jaylen Warren. Jaylen Warren was someone who I had much higher before the hamstring injury and also why Najee got pushed up so much. But, I mean, Ramondre Stevenson is the guy in New England. He's going to have 60 to 70 plus targets. I think he could really have 60 to 70 plus receptions, honestly, in this offense. It's going to be playing from behind a lot of checkdowns, either with Jacoby Brissett or with the rookie quarterback Drake May. I think Jacoby Brissett would spell great things for Ramondre Stevenson, even more so than Drake May, because Drake May has a big-time arm and could push it down the field. If Drake May starts, I think Ramondre Stevenson has his best yards per carry season. He's always been historically in that 3.8 to 4.2 range, but has a little bit more wiggle. I think he has a better rushing time if Drake May starts. If Jacoby Brissett starts, he's going to catch passes like crazy. So I'm in on Ramondre Stevenson, especially at this cost. You're talking about right now, he's one of my favorite guys going in round 6, 7 in your redraft starts.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a guy here that I actually like a little bit better than Ramondre Stevenson just because of being in a way better offense, and that's DeAndre Swift. I think the Bears are going to be a second half of the year team where they really start turning up, and like people were like, this ain't the Chicago Bears I remember, but DeAndre Swift, if you're just looking at his career so far, it's been disappointing for what his ADP has been, but he's been top 24 running back in points per game in all 4 seasons, top 15 in 3 seasons, and top 8 in 1 season. So he has that ceiling. He's one of the better guys in space, one of the better pass catchers in the NFL. He's had pacing 70, 60 plus receptions in 3 out of 4 seasons. Last year in Philly, hit 40, and the Eagles were one of the least targeted running back teams out of the backfield there was. In 16 games, 1,000 rushing yards, had his best rushing season yet. I just think DeAndre Swift has such a high floor in full PPR there with Caleb Williams there. I think he's clear bell cow running back there in Chicago. I don't really think Khalil Herbert's anything special. He'll play, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to take receiving away from DeAndre Swift. I just think 50, 60 passes is a really high floor for DeAndre Swift out of the backfield as a receiver, and I think he could be a guy that puts up 900 to 1,000 rushing yards. So I'm really excited for DeAndre Swift to maybe bounce back and bring us back that Lions nostalgia in his rookie season for how good he looked.
And this is still in that 7th round. ADP would suggest you take Zamir White. We have to mention that, you top 15 running back over the final 4 weeks, very small sample size, but the dude is yoked. The guy is going to be the bell cow there. And I think this is where you look at redraft ADP versus what you really want. And I'm passing in round 7 and 8, and I'm waiting until round 9 and getting my league winner, Tajay Spears, who I would have in that 24 spot, but I want to be clear with you guys that most people are going to take Zamir White, but I think Tajay Spears is someone, if you look at, yards after catch, if you look at receptions, you look at his targets, you look at his fantasy points per touch, this is someone that's top 12 in all those metrics, who I think absolutely booms if Tony Pollard were to miss any time. So guys, love doing these redraft YouTube videos. Again, make sure you guys like, follow, and subscribe. Ask questions on here. Follow at Brock Dynasty for his fantastic edits. So we thank you again for tuning in, and enjoy the process.